What's going on, guys? I'm Rob. This is Venturi Fab, and today we're doing brakes on my wife's SUV. We're doing fronts and rears, which means we're going to cover both 2-piston calipers and 1-piston calipers, which will cover about 90% of the vehicles on the road, because the brakes that are in this GM SUV are the same as the brakes on a 3/4 ton truck, are the same as the brakes on a Tacoma, are the same as the brakes on a Honda Accord. So this video is going to be a complete guide from jacking your truck up or your car up and getting it off the ground and getting your wheels off safely, to what tools you're going to need, to how to get the old stuff off and the new stuff on, and then get it all back down on the ground again and ready to use. We are going to be upgrading the brakes while we're at this. We're going to be doing power stop drilled and slotted rotors and carbon ceramic power stop brake pads. These are factory replacements, so you're not changing your calipers or anything like that. The pads are the same size. The rotors are all the same size. They're just drilled and slotted and with a little bit more aggressive of a compound for increased stopping power because, as I said, hills, deer, windy roads. So we've already covered our rotors and our pads. The nice thing, I get these in a kit. The power stops come in a kit also, so they come with all your new sliders and hardware for the front and the rear. They come with all your new little rubber seals and gaskets and protectors for your sliders. We'll go over those when they go on there. And they also come with the correct ceramic silicone brake lubricant. If you get normal brakes, they don't always come with that. Or not normal brakes, but if you get like a more of a direct factory replacement brake, they might not come with that. But we're covering that here. So the consumable stuff you need, obviously you're going to need towels to clean up after yourself. You're going to need brake clean for cleaning stuff. You're going to need some medium strength thread locker for your hardware on the brakes. And then, as I said, the power stop comes with their own silicone. But otherwise, I use this stuff. It's called Silglide. It's for brake calipers and all that type of stuff specifically. I've used this stuff for a couple decades. It works great. So tools wise, you're going to need a hammer. You might need some sort of screwdriver or small pry bar. You're going to need some basic sockets to get your calipers off. You're probably going to need a breaker bar to get some stuff loose and some stuff tight. You're going to want a torque wrench at the end for torquing your wheels to the proper specs so that they're not over tightened or under tightened. And then you'll need some sort of caliper compression tool. These are the ones that I use. We'll go over them a little bit more as we get to using them on the caliper. Let's start by getting the front up in the air. You do brake pads in pairs, so you're either going to do both fronts, both rears, or in our case, we're going to do all four. So we're going to get this front in the air. I'll show you how to go about doing that. And we'll get these wheels off and get to it. So before you lift your car, the first thing you want to do is chock your wheel. We're going to use a big old cinder block there. Before you lift your car, you want to break all your lug nuts loose first. See, if you try to do that when your tire is free hanging, it's just going to spin your wheel and you're going to be fighting yourself. So being a full-size SUV, this is built like a truck. It's a body-on-frame construction. You have your frame, which is separate than the body, and all of your suspension, all your drivetrain, everything is mounted to the frame. The structure of your car is all in the frame. Whereas a unibody car, which is going to be like a Honda Accord or a Kia or even some of those smaller new trucks like a Maverick or something, they don't have a frame. Their frame is part of the body. So on one of those, they'll have kind of a channel down the middle. You can mount and lift from there, and you can put your jack stands on that. Or they're also designed on the outer edge is what's called the pinch weld. It comes down and there's a seam, and the strength of the body is there. If you're not sure where it's safe to lift your car, that information is always going to be in the owner's manual of that vehicle, or a quick Google search should help you figure out exactly where it's safe to lift from. The one spot that is never safe to lift from, whether it's body on frame or unibody, is these big flat sections inside of your pinch welds or inside of the frame rails. These are your floor. The floor is not designed to hold the weight of the vehicle. We're going to lift this on the frame. We're going to put the jack stand on the frame. Now notice, I'm not going under the car. I'm reaching under it to put the stand up. So we have that centered up on the frame. We'll let the jack down slowly. If you don't have a big skid plate like this, in between your suspension pieces in the front here, there's usually a nice big heavy duty cross member, and you can also lift from that and it'll lift your car both sides at the same time. So this is one of those jobs I definitely recommend wearing gloves for, because you're dealing with a lot of nasty stuff. You got all this brake dust, everything like that, and then you're dealing with a decent amount of harsh chemicals, right? You're dealing with your brake cleaners and your greases and your lubes and your brake fluid and all that stuff, and it's really just better to keep that stuff off your skin if you can. And we can roll our wheel out of the way. Another thing that a lot of people like to do is take their wheel and slide it under the car. That way, it's out of your way, you're not tripping on it, and it acts as like a double fail-safe, right? So if one of your stands were to fail, your car can't crash down on top of you because it's got a wheel between you and it. So here we are. We now have access to our brakes. And now I know that my wife's shock is leaking, so that's cool. So a lot of times, all of this brake hardware is going to be on here really, really tight, and you want to have good access to this, like to all this hardware. So what you can do is you hop in the vehicle, turn the wheel, because you're going to be doing these one side at a time, and turn it so that this wheel is turned out. Just like that. So now we've got much better access to all of our caliper bolts, because we're going to need to take off these two bolts to take this clamshell off, and these two bolts to get the rotor off. So on this car, these are an 18 and a 19. On something like a Honda Civic, this is probably going to be like a 14 and a 17, or a 12 and a 14. Something like that. Like I said, the difference between the smaller vehicles and the larger vehicles isn't the way that the brakes operate, it's the size of everything. These are just physically larger because the vehicle weighs 3 times as much. So all of this hardware should be really tight. If this is really loose, that's not a good thing. So we'll crack all these loose. So you can see how this one is spinning on the inside. So we're going to need to get a wrench and throw a wrench on that. There we go. And see how this one doesn't want to just slide off. A lot of times these pads will have like a little nipple on them, so we need to release a little bit of the residual pressure in this for it to move. So you're going to take your screwdriver or your small pry bar, stick it down in the hole, and you're going to pry off the edge of this and on the lip of the rotor. You're going to be in there kind of like this. And we're going to squeeze that just enough that this becomes loose enough to come out. Now, the other thing that we don't want to do now that this is off, is you don't want to just let this hang and put all that pressure on this rubber hose. So we want to find somewhere to put this that it's not going to fall. Or if you don't have anywhere good to set that, like right here, we just have it set on the control arm. If you don't have somewhere good to set that, you could also like loop a bungee cord through it and hang it from somewhere. The whole idea is you just don't want all that stress on this rubber hose. So now we're going to pull these bottom ones off for our actual bracket.
Oh. Okay.
And you want to make sure that you loosen them both before you take any of them all the way out, because if you just loosen one and then try to do the other one, a lot of times it won't really want to loosen and it'll just want to slam your caliper bracket around. So you want to get both of these moving together. So you can see this powdery yellow residue on there. That's the factory yellow Loctite that they put on these. Then this piece slides off. Her front brakes really weren't that bad, at least not on this side. We haven't looked at the other side yet. Now we're going to get this rotor off. So a lot of times these rotors are not secured on with anything else, but on Hondas and also apparently on these, there's a little screw here. This one's a Torx. We'll go find out what size in a second. You're going to have to undo this so that this rotor will come off. Now this car, this came loose right away on its own. That is not always the case. A lot of times the back side of this rotor will corrode and rust onto this flange and it's stuck on there good. And what you do when that happens is why I said you need a hammer. You can just tap around and hit your rotor until it breaks loose and then it comes off. So as we had said, mine came off cleanly. If yours was corroded or if this isn't smooth at all or anything, you can take a wire brush and go through and just spend a couple minutes and clean it up. That way it's good and clean and true. Your rotor's not going to settle on there crooked at all. It's just going to be nice and smooth. You're not going to have any problems with pulsation or anything like that. So the next step we're going to do before we put anything else back up on here, in case you make a little bit of a mess, we're going to retract the pistons on our caliper. This is a 2-piston caliper. Clearly, 1, 2 pistons. So these pistons have a seal inside here, and then this is a dust boot. It's meant to keep brake dust, dirt, all that junk out of the seal so it doesn't mess up the seal behind these. So you want to clean this off so that we're not pushing a bunch of nasty dirt and junk back through those seals, which is going to increase the likelihood that those seals fail, right? Also, you want to inspect these dust boots to see if they're ripped or torn or messed up. Obviously on this car, they're fine. So we're going to spray some brake cleaner on a rag and just get in here and wipe all this down. You can pull the seals back a little bit. The whole idea is just not to push a bunch of dirt back through your seals. Now, there's multiple ways of putting these back through. I know a lot of people that will take a pad, put it on there, get a big set of channel locks and squeeze it back. That works. There are other types of brake tools in this one, but this is where I really like this guy. These are inexpensive, and if you're going to be doing your own brakes, there's 2 different styles. I'll show you the other one when we do the rear brakes. This is the one for dual pistons, because you can see it's got the 2. You can tell dual piston calipers before you pull your car apart because they've got these 2 outside tangs, and then they've got this one in the middle. Only dual pistons have this one in the middle. If it's a single piston, it'll just be the 2 outers. So this little hook here hooks onto that inner piston there, hooks onto that inner piston guy, and then you just pull the trigger, and it's got like a ratcheting mechanism in it so that it keeps pressure on these and it doesn't let pressure back off. So then you can slowly push these back in. Everything should move nice and smooth. You want to watch your pistons and make sure that they're pushing back in nice and even. Like if only one side's moving and one piston's locked up, that's a problem. There's probably something wrong with your caliper. Until they don't anymore. And now your piston's all the way in.
Yeah.
So this is the part we're going to put our lube on this to get ready for reinstalling it. One of the issues that I have with what I see a lot of people do is they'll just take their pads and take either anti-seize or the silicone grease and just smear it all over the place. And that's completely unnecessary. All that's going to do is attract a bunch of dirt because this is sitting in there. It's just going to build up dirt and brake dust and trap it there because you've got all this grease and sticky stuff. The only parts that need to be lubed are the parts that are touching. You need lube on your pistons, and you need lube on the back side of these where they're pressing on the pads. So we're going to take our Sil Glide, and I'm only putting it where it's going to touch. That way we're not attracting a bunch of unnecessary dirt and grime and grease and dust and all that stuff. It's going to keep our brakes looking nicer through the wheel because the face of the brake pad on the outside isn't going to be grabbing every little piece of junk that goes past it. Our next step is going to be getting the caliper brackets ready. Well, I guess I forgot to hit record on my camera, so we're going to go through this again. Your calipers came off, so your pads are going to be side specific. These ones have squeakers on them, so as your pad wears down, and when it gets to about 15-ish% life left, this little metal bar will start dragging on your rotor and making a bunch of noise, letting you know that it's time to do brakes. So you get those, you're going to strip everything down, you pull your hardware off and match it up to the hardware that comes with your new pads. The other really important thing that you want to make sure you do is pull your slide pins out. These should move in and out freely. You want to pull these out, clean them. You can see how nasty the old grease was that was in there, and that's because it gets all contaminated with brake grease, or not brake grease, but brake dust and road grime and stuff. Even though they've got these little dust boot seals, it just kind of works its way in there over time. So we're going to put a nice fresh coat of our silicone Sil Glide on here. You don't need to slather them and pack these cavities with it, but you want a nice good coat on here so they're good and lubricated for future service with you. We're going to put our new hardware kit on here. There's one. Get our next one on, and it's got, you can see it's got this little tang piece that fits down in between these grooves, so they're kind of self-centering. Now, this is another slide area, right? Your pads are going to be sliding along these. So this is another area that you need to lubricate. And same with the caliper, you don't just slap lube all over everything. We're just going to put it in the area where it's going to contact your pads, so that you don't have any of that grinding metal on metal sound from the pads not being lubricated, because that'll make them start squeaking, or it can at least. Get those, get those all greased up. So our sliders are greased, they're moving freely. We have our new hardware on here. It's lubed up and ready to accept brake pads. We are caliper compressed and also lubed up, ready to accept brake pads. So we're ready to start going back together. So when they ship these, they put an oily coating on them. It's like a rust prohibitor, so that they don't, as they're sitting there waiting for people to buy them, so they don't get any sort of flash rust or surface rust on them. Don't. So you're going to spray it with some brake clean. Wipe around on your brake surface, because that oil that's on there, if you don't clean it off, will contaminate your pads, and then your pads won't do their job as good because they're contaminated with oil. I'm going to spray this backside. Now we're going to put the rotor on the car. So if you'll remember, one of them had a Torx bolt in it, so we want to make sure that that Torx bolt lines up with the Torx bolt that it came out of. So that'll be on there like that. Now this bolt, and this is the same for Hondas, have a lock bolt on here too. Do not put Loctite on this bolt. This is a 0 Loctite bolt. All you're going to do if you put Loctite on that bolt is make the next person to do brakes life difficult. More difficult than it needs to be. So if, like most cars, your car does not have one of those little lock bolts, what that does is it keeps your rotor aligned and it keeps it from wanting to shift and be cockeyed while you're putting everything else together. So if you don't have one of the bolts, what you can do is take a lug nut, put it on, and just tighten it down all the way, and that will hold your caliper down. So now we're going to put our caliper bracket on. And these bolts, if you'll remember, do need to be Loctited. A lot of Chevys and Fords will come from the factory with this yellow Loctite on there. You don't need to go get the special yellow Loctite. Your standard blue medium strength is going to be just fine. Put some of that on the threads, and make sure you put it on the threads towards the tip of the threads. That way, as you tighten it down, any excess that gets squeezed will squeeze down the threads and get locked on there. So now, as with everything, you can look up the specific torque spec for your car for these bolts. And if you can't find a torque spec, you just go really tight. Now our pads are going to go on. Those will slip in. Those will slip in. Now we're going to prep our 2 caliper bolts. They're going to get the same treatment. Loctite, Loctite. We're going to put our caliper on. Now this was separate, and it's really easy, like if this was up there and it was twisted. You see how if I try to put this on, my brake line's all twisted up. If you're having trouble getting your brake line on, just make sure you look at that. Pay attention to this. This shouldn't be under any sort of tension at all. It should be nice and free, smooth flowing. So if that's binding up at all, you're probably going to need to twist your caliper around. You just got it twisted 180 degrees or something like that. And the same, there's a torque spec for these. If you can't find it, the torque spec is good and tight. And they're Loctited on. The same as if you remember when we took these off, when you're tightening these down, make sure you look at this nut. If this was spinning before when it was coming off, it might spin when you're tightening it back down. And you need to make sure that obviously for this to get tight, this needs to not be moving. So you might need to put a wrench on this while you tighten these, but you probably won't. And now this side's all done. We're going to go do the other side real quick, and we'll get down to dropping this thing back off of these racks. All right, so this is what I wanted to bring you in for on the rear. This is a single piston caliper, right? One piston, and it doesn't have that middle fork. It's just got the 2 on the side. That's how you can tell, like I said, from the outside. If it's got the 2 fingers, it's a 1 piston. If it's got the 3, it's a dual piston. So some of these, especially like your 90s Buicks and stuff, they'll have, I'll put a picture of it up, but it'll have like a cross pattern in the piston, and the face of this piston will be solid. Here's a picture of it. And those take a special tool. You can see it's got all these different patterns of studs all around on the side. You find the one that fits your caliper, and then it screws in, right? So you'll put it on a ratchet, and put some forward force on it and ratchet it in. So now we're going to get our wheel back on. So the important thing here is you want to make sure your wheel's fully seated. Obviously, you're not going to be able to torque it all the way down right now, because as soon as you get too much torque on it, it's just going to want to spin because you're free floating up in the air. So get it good and snug, give it a quick spin, and you're just looking where it meets the rotor to make sure that it's not on crooked. You'll feel it when it seats though. It's a solid chunk. Stand. And you want to lower it just until the wheels touch in the ground. You don't want all the weight on the car on it. You want enough pressure on it that it's going to stop it from turning. And now we want to torque it. This is an actual very, very important torque. So look up your car. This is a 2015 Cadillac Escalade, so the torque on this wheel for this car is 140. If you're like a car, you're typically going to be somewhere between like 76 and 100. Full-size trucks are usually 120 to 150, depending on the truck. And you want to make sure you go in a star pattern so that everything is torqued good and even. All right, now that your brakes are all in, you're going to want to press the pedal a few times to take up that slack. Because right now you can press the piston all the way, so you're going to need to squeeze it a few times so the piston comes out and seats against the new brake pads. So these first couple of pumps are going to feel like absolute garbage. That's totally normal. And then you can see already it's nice and firm again. And so that's how you know you're good. So just remember, when you're done with your brakes, those first couple pumps are going to feel like trash. But after one or two, you should be nice and firm again. So now that our pedal's good there, we know our brakes are working, we are going to remove our chock so that we don't drive over it trying to pull out and go for a test drive. So our final thing before we go on a test drive, we want to make sure that our brake fluid is full, which it is. And now we're going to go break these brake pads in. All right. So what you want to do is now you want to seat your pads and get them broke into your rotors. It only takes a couple minutes, but it's the proper way to do this. So you don't want to just jump onto the highway and start driving like normal. You want to bed your pads in. So you want to find maybe like a street that not many people drive on in your neighborhood, or if you're like me and you're in the country, you just pick a road that no one's on hardly ever. And what you want to do is you just need somewhere where you can accelerate up to like, I don't know, 30, 40 miles an hour, and then evenly step on the brakes, not barely touching the brakes to stop, not slamming on the brakes and coming to a stop, but a nice regular stop, and hold them down at the same spot all the way till when you stop. Hold them for a couple seconds and then keep going on your way. And you want to do that 2 or 3 times. So we're going to accelerate up to like 40. And then even pressure, stop. Sit for a second. We're going to do it again. There's 40. Stop for a couple seconds and go. And as long as everything's feeling good with all that, you are ready to rip. You just changed brake pads. So I hope that was helpful for you. If you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to reach out in the comments, or you can find me over on Instagram, or we got a Venturi Fab Facebook page. Reach out to me however you need to. I know a lot of this stuff, the very first time you do it, can be fairly intimidating, but once you've done some of these little projects once or twice, you'll realize if someone like me can do it, someone like you definitely can too. So, thanks for tuning in, and get to working on your car, buddy.